Hello, Wild One members. My name is Roseanne Plant, and today we're going to do the second installment of my webinar. Last year, I talked about the weed police and what to do if the weed police come knock on your door. And as native plant enthusiasts, that sometimes happens to us. I would encourage you, if that does happen to you, to consult my previous webcast that talked about what to do. But today is 2.0, and we're going to talk about how to make friends with the weed police. Since my last webinar about a year ago, I've taken the time to write a sample native plant ordinance. Now, what is that? Well, an ordinance is a law that a local municipality or township adopts to govern procedures. Ordinances can be found for anything: curb length, where your dog can go to the potty, all of those things. But when it comes to native plants, we often find native plant ordinances. They're becoming more prevalent, but they're still an up and coming thing for most municipalities. I went ahead and wrote a model ordinance because I think it's important for us to be advocates in the native plant world. So today is all about how do you take my native plant ordinance and apply it to your home? Now, first of all, I need to tell you where it's at. Our native plant sample ordinance is right there on the Wild Ones webpage. It's available at any time, and I'm available at any time to answer questions about it. I was a city attorney for the city of Sioux City, and I spent 7 years actually writing their ordinances. So I have a little experience in the field, and I'm happy to share it with all the members of the Wild Ones. And it's my goal, along with the Wild Ones, to spread goodwill and good education to all municipalities, townships, even homeowners associations about how we can encourage native plants. So with that, let's get started today. I want to talk about the native plant ordinance, and I want to talk about what you can do to make friends with the weed police. So as always, as a former university teacher, I have an agenda today. Or what are we going to learn? So I think we're probably all here because of the fact that you want to change the world. Well, the native plant world, at least. What can I do to change the world and make it more conducive for native plants to be understood and, more importantly, accepted? Now, you're probably in one of two groups that I hear from. Either we have a native plant ordinance and it's really outdated or needs some work, or probably the second one, my township, my municipality, my HOA, they don't even know what a native plant is. So you're probably going to fall in one of these two buckets, so to speak, when you call me or contact me. So today is here for both of you, for both groups of people. What can I do to make where I live native plant friendly? That's all we're doing today. And my sample ordinance is just a starting point. For so many people, it's really about, well, where do I start and what do I do? And I hope that the ordinance that I wrote can help you do that. It can be a starting point. It doesn't mean my ordinance is perfect, and it doesn't mean that it'll meet every need. Obviously, we have varied environments from, well, as the song says, sea to shining sea. We have people all the way up in Maine, all the way to California, Oregon, and Washington. So my native plant ordinance might not meet all your needs, but it might give you a great place to start. So today I'm going to talk about this using these 5 steps to help anybody bring awareness to this topic. So the first one is we're going to turn a weed into a bloom. And I'm going to tell you more about that here shortly. We're going to turn a weed into a bloom. Number 2 is we're going to show them, meaning our town folks, our elected officials, our city council, our board of supervisors, our HOA board, whoever's in charge, we're going to show them how this is going to work. And more importantly, you might want to lean in for this one, how it's going to benefit not just you, but the community. Number 3, we're going to talk about knowing the right people to contact. It's all about who you know. That's the old saying, and it's true. It's very true here. Number 4, I'm going to ask you to do just a little bit of homework. Find and read the current law, or find out that there's no law at all and it's an opening to offer our sample ordinance. And last but not least, something that wraps it all up is to get involved and be the resource. Be the resource, because that is the most important thing. As Wild One members, we are advocates for the wild ones, for the plants, and for the native plant movement. If we all take just a little bit of time and we affect change locally, as they say, all politics are local. Well, if we start locally, pretty soon we'll have statewide buy-in, pretty soon nationwide buy-in. So it's important for you to be a resource. Never think one person can't make a difference. One person absolutely can make a difference. And it always starts with one person as well. So you may start an entire movement in your community with just this one action that we're going to talk about today. So I'm here to be your resource so that you can be a resource to others. So let's take it step by step. Number 1, what do I mean by turning a weed into a bloom? Well, really, where did all of this start? Where did the Weed Police seminar start? How about today? It all started with members like you that experienced something that wasn't so great, kind of a weed in their life. The Weed Police knocked on the door. A neighbor called, a concerned group, whoever it is, somebody in the community contacted the leaders of the community, the law enforcement, and they said, this person has what we think are weeds in their yard. They don't look like normal plants. For all of us who are native plant lovers, we know the native plants are kind of like teenagers. They have stages where they don't look so great, okay? We've all had our awkward stage. And they later turn into beautiful blooms, just like individuals. But you have to go through the awkward stage before you have the beauty. And so it's this awkward stage, and the fact that as a culture, we have a really set way of looking at beauty in our lawns. It's the turf grass, boxwood, petunias, box store flowers. And if you ever travel to Europe, you'll see that this is not an idea of culture of what's beautiful in a yard, but it's our mainstream culture. And so as Wild One members, we have to change the culture. And to change the culture takes education. So what are we going to do? We're going to turn a weed, a bad situation, maybe a ticket, an ordinance violation, or an angry neighbor into a bloom. Now, the first step here is to take a big, deep breath. That's right, take a breath. Because when somebody attacks something that you are so proud of, like a native garden, you're going to get a little upset. And I understand that. As an attorney, I deal with conflict every single day. And I've talked to Wild One members that are so upset, that have spent time, money, and effort into turning a beautiful area into a native plant area. And unfortunately, I talked to one Wild One member that came home one day and her entire garden had been mowed. They didn't give her proper notice, and the municipality came in and cut everything down. She was rightfully very, very upset. But the first thing to do is not get upset. Take a deep breath, realize it was a mistake, and probably a mistake based on the fact that they weren't educated, that wasn't a weed, it was a bloom. So I know this is asking a lot, but take a deep breath and try not to be upset and turn that weed into a bloom. So what did I do with that Wild One member that was so terribly upset? Well, I gave her a couple days to cool off. And then I called her and I said, did you look up the ordinance? And if you watched my first webinar, you'll know that that's one of the first things I tell anybody. What law, ordinance, local, state, or local county law did you break? First of all, find the law. What is it? And read about it. So she found the little bit of law that was there, and she realized that actually she hadn't broken it all, except for maybe one slight area where it wasn't quite clear. There was some vagueness to it. And that was about the height of the native plant. And she said, I think maybe some of my plants were slightly over the 4-inch regulation, but they don't define weed, and they certainly didn't include native plants in this. So I told her, this is a great opportunity for education. And this is a great opportunity for you to be the advocate in your community, to tell them what a native plant is, to tell them they might grow over 4 inches, but that they'll be flowering. And it is an open opportunity to work with the municipality. Perhaps people would feel better if you simply put a border around your native plant garden. That could be a fence. You could agree to what the border is. Maybe it would just be a setback from the main area where the sidewalk was, but you can work with municipalities. So after she calmed down, she realized that this was a great opportunity. She realized it was turning a weed into a bloom. So that's the first thing. Take a deep breath, calm down, and let's see if we can turn a negative into a big positive. Nothing is ever a mistake if we can gain from it. So that is step 1. Step 2 goes hand in hand with that. Show them, meaning the municipality, in the elected officials, why and how they could benefit from using native plant ordinances and having native plants in their landscape. So I can't say this enough, and I'm starting the first process here. Educate, educate, educate. Now, we love native plants, and as native plant members of the Wild Ones, we know everything about native plants, but not everybody does, and you have to realize that. So I encouraged her to print off some general information, which you can often find on the Wild Ones website, and talk to her elected officials. Take a picture of her beautiful garden that had been unfortunately cut down and explain what was in it. Why did she plant it? I said, why did you have this? She said, I have a huge erosion problem. I said, that lots of people do. Show them why you did it, why you picked those native plants, and what you were hoping to do as a solution with them. Educate, educate, educate. You might even want to find an area in the community that has some erosion problems and tell the municipality, the elected officials, how something like what you did in your yard on a small scale could benefit the community on a bigger scale. If all of a sudden native plants become a positive and an asset for the community, they might, meaning the elected officials, be more willing to step in, use our native plant ordinance, not just for homeowners, but for the community as a whole. And of course, as a Wild Ones member, you would be able to assist them in finding great plants to start with. This is just one of 100 different ways that you can educate. You want to say, why is this going to benefit them in the community? That's your goal of the education. Why is this going to benefit? Now, you want to keep this always very positive. Like I said, in number 1, you're going to probably be upset, but you want to be positive. This carries over into area number 2 because you always want to be the positive person. Don't be a negative Nelly. You don't want that. If you don't do this, this is what's going to happen. If you don't do this, we're going to have more erosion. People do not like negative. Though it may be a little hard and you may be met with some negativism, you don't want to take that on and reflect it. You want to be positive. You might get the typical, but they just look like weeds. They're ugly. To which you can say, for only about 3 weeks or whatever it is. And you might want to say, but the root structures is what's going to keep that erosion from happening. And here's a bonus tip. If you can show your local municipality how native plants can save them money, well, you're really going to become a community champion. because unfortunately, running a budget for a municipality is just as challenging as running a budget for your home or any other organization. Money is tight right now, and native plants, as we know, are sustainable. They sustain themselves. Once planted, they can be spread, they can be harvested, they can be dug up and planted in new areas. They really are self-supporting and they benefit us. So educate, educate, educate. Say to that person, that elected official, I want to show you why I did it, why I think we should do it. And also point out if there is a native plant ordinance, how our sample ordinance could enhance it, improve it, or, and here's the big sell, and we're coming up on number 3, say, I have a sample ordinance and I would love to be the citizen who brings this to the table. I would love to share how this can benefit everybody in the community. So don't forget, number 2 starts with education, but it's going to weave its way through this entire process. Never let an opportunity to educate pass you by at any time with any community leader. All right. And that brings us to number 3. Know the right people to contact. Okay. So you might have grown up in a household where you asked mom for certain things and dad for certain things, or maybe grandma and grandpa. In my house, if mom said no, I always went to grandma. I had to know the right people to contact for the right thing. Same thing here. It's important to know the right people at the right time. So exactly who is the city, county, or a local attorney assigned to this matter? And once you find out, make them your new best friend. So they might, as for instance, in the city I used to work with, there was somebody that ran what we called inspection services. Now, inspection services in my city where I worked was in charge of the weed police. And they were very active with the weed police individually. We would hire interns in the summer to go out, but inspection services had many duties under them: electrical inspections, cement inspection, sidewalk. The weed police function was just one of probably 100 things they did. And I'm thinking you're probably going to run into the same thing. What the weed police, their function is one of many. And so, to be honest, it's probably not going to be on the top of their priority list. So what you want to do is find out which department in the city you want to go to, but then there's usually somebody who's in charge of that sub area. That's the person you need to zero in on. And then you want to be their helpful best friend. Now, there's a difference between being a best friend and being a pest. What you don't want to do is call this person, whoever it is, every day at the same time and say, are you working on that? Are you working on that? Did you get my email? What are you doing with my native plant ordinance? Hello, hello, hello. What's going to happen? You're going to get pushed to the bottom of the pile. This is how you get noticed. Hello, I'm so-and-so, and I'd like to help you pass this ordinance. I'd like to help maybe head up a committee of citizens. What can I do to help you move this forward? See the difference? The first one is, what are you going to do for me? And the second one is, what can I do for you? Now, some people may say, well, they're the elected officials. They work for me. Yes, but in this day and age, if you want to get something done, you've got to know the proper channels. And you also have to have some people skills and a little bit of diplomacy. So it's much better to approach somebody, what can I do to help you, rather than what are you doing for me only? That's the key. So I want to give you an example of something I encountered as a city attorney. It didn't have to do with weeds, but it can be applied. We had a terrible, many years ago in Sioux City, incident of animal abuse with some dogs. And a group of ladies who were involved with the local rescue shelter became very upset. And they looked in our city code and realized we had no animal cruelty ordinances. They became pretty enraged about it and wanted to know why. They were directed to my office. I was the assistant city attorney, and animal control and everything animal control like was under my responsibilities. So I worked with these incredibly talented ladies for 9.5 months. We met once a month and we drafted an ordinance so that people knew that Sioux City was serious about people not abusing pets or animals. And we were able to then expand that to many other types of animal ordinances, such as controlling wildlife or livestock in city limits, when you could have chickens, when you couldn't, all those kind of things. Because I'm from Iowa and we have animals sometimes in the immediate rural areas outside of our towns. So those ladies were incredibly helpful. Some of the things that they did to help me do my job better was they brought me ordinances from other jurisdictions. We had, like I said, monthly meetings. I would work on things. They would take them back and discuss them, different drafts. And so we worked together as a community liaison group to bring real change to Sioux City. And about a year later, we had a final product that they were extremely happy with. The same could be here. You could approach that city official and say, I would like to be the change. I would like to be the community leader. They're always looking for community members to step up and be those leaders. And this is a great opportunity. You don't have to come up with an ordinance and you don't have to do any research because I've done it for you. You just have to take our model ordinance and present it to the group. And so you want to be a best friend to that city official, but remember, you want to be a friend. You don't want to be a pest. And also remember point number 2, which is always, like I said, feeding through this presentation, educate, educate, educate. Everybody on that committee that you meet, citizens, other members of the city, every single person is an opportunity to educate about native plants and their benefit. So that's number 3, know the right people so you get what you want. Now, along with that, I always encourage, if you're going to do and be one of those community leaders, that you read the current law. Is there any law out there? Okay. Oftentimes, these city ordinances are very antiquated and dated. There may be something out there about weeds, but they may not define what a weed is. It may be a very vague nuisance ordinance. A lot of cities adopted in the 70s, 80s, and 90s general, what we called umbrella nuisance ordinances. Now, what is a nuisance? Excuse me, I have a little allergies here. A nuisance is anything that's offensive to any of your 5 senses. If it smells funny, looks funny, it interferes with, the proper drainage or anything in city streets. So a lot of times municipalities think that ordinances, that weeds and native plants and all those things fall under the big umbrella, or I call it a kitchen sink ordinance of nuisance. Oftentimes it shouldn't really apply to native plants at all. So see what you have to work with. That's always important to get a touchstone or a starting place. All right. And then see what they have and offer our ordinance, our sample ordinance. So number 1 under this one is there current code or is there a current ordinance? What do you have to start with? How old is it? If it's 20, 30 years old, it probably needs to be completely revoked, which means everything needs to be taken down from that ordinance and needs to be replaced with something new. Can it be updated? Once again, it depends on how old and for what purposes that the original law was written. Here we have again, can you form a citizens committee? Can you get a group together? Now, I want to stop right there for just a moment and say I have received some feedback from Wild Ones members where they say, I'd like to have a citizens committee, and either there's not staff that is willing to take that on, or, the city or township or the HOA they're not supportive of it. They don't want to have a group and they don't want to meet. So I guess I'm done. And my answer is no, you're not done. You've asked, but maybe they don't have a arena or a stage for you to do that. But that certainly doesn't mean that you can't form a citizens committee and meet in your own home. Don't let premature roadblocks block you from advancing native plants. I know a lot of cities that have very, very lean staffs. I mean, we're in a day and age now where people are doing way more with way less staff. So if they don't have somebody, or if they don't have the time to support the citizens committee, once again, be an advocate, be a leader in the native plant area and form that citizens committee. Meet at your home, meet at a local coffee shop, put together some information. And once again, be a blessing, be a leader, don't be a pest. And then present it and say, well, I know, staffing is short, but we went ahead and met 3 times, 5 times, 10 times. And here is something that we think could benefit the city or the municipality or the HOA. Don't let lack of support from the city deter you, because normally it's just lack of resources or lack of staffing. So that's a point I want to bring up about these citizens committees. You don't have to be ordained by the city to have a committee. Absolutely not. And fourth on this slide, make yourself a resource. Yes, I'm telling you to do the work for them. Absolutely. But the more you can wrap it up and present it to them, the more likely it is that they're going to pass the native plant ordinance, either my sample one or one based upon it, or one that perhaps you are inspired by my sample ordinance and put together a new one. I want to reiterate that my ordinance is not the end all. Okay. It's a sample ordinance, which means it's like an ice cream flavor. It's just one type out there. If you want to ebb and flow and make it your own, tailor it to your climate, to your area, that is entirely up to you. You can pick and choose the parts and pieces that you like, or you can take none of it and just use it as a reference and a starting point. So if you do the work, you present it, and most importantly, the committee really thinks about it. And here's another bonus tip today. Be critical of your own work. Figure out what they might tag as a problem and fix it. Be proactive. If you say, wow, this is going to take a lot of native plants, I don't think we have the money for this, contact the Wild Ones. See if there's resources. See if you can apply for grants through your local master gardener organization. See if you can raise the funding. So when you go and they say, who's going to pay for this? That's always a question. You can say, and here's my plan. Plug the holes before the holes are there. The more you have done, the better chance it is you're going to get your ordinance or a ordinance passed to support native plants. Last, but certainly not least, get involved. And as I've said before, you'll hear some themes here. Be a resource now in the fight to get the ordinance passed and later. So an ordinance is only as good as the fact that people see it, understand, and use it. So if I pass a law and nobody knows it exists and nobody follows it, nobody enforces it, it's just a law on the books. We always hear about those weird laws, that you can't chew bubble gum after 5 o'clock in Louisiana or some crazy thing. Okay. Those are old, forgotten laws and ordinances. And unless you're a resource now and later, that might happen to your native plant ordinance. So number 1 on this list is call a local attorney or one of the Wild Ones attorneys. I'm going to put a plug in for the Wild One attorneys. We have several members of the Wild Ones who are attorneys or paralegals that work in the legal field. And we get together once a month, sometimes more, and we work on projects and legal work for the Wild Ones group. I'm excited to say I've been a Wild Ones attorney now for over a year, and I really enjoy marrying my skill as a lawyer to my love of plants. So number 1, If you are in the legal profession, we'd love to have you join us. We always have lots of projects we could use your help on. And number two, if you need a Wild Ones attorney, please do not ever feel you can't call us. The door is always open. You just have to submit a help ticket, and one of the Wild Ones attorneys will call you. Now, we can't help you individually. We can't represent you, for instance, in court. Well, we can certainly give you some good overarching advice and some guidance. And so right there, I'd like to stop and talk about two recent calls I've had to demonstrate the kind of things that the wild attorneys take on. So two recent cases were, I had somebody call me, and sadly she had received the dreaded ticket from the weed police. She was really upset. She's worked on a beautiful garden in her area, and she had the dreaded nosy neighbor problem. Now, I hear about this a lot. So she's got a neighbor who's retired and is very interested in her native plantings. She received not just a visit, but a citation from the weed police, and she was very, very sad about it. I asked her, did you talk to the local official? And she said, yes, at great length she did. And he admitted that they had no native plant ordinances, and that really he was there because the neighbor had called and called and called. So it was what I call complaint driven at this point. I told her it was important to ask what law she violated, and more importantly, how she could keep her native plants, but also keep the neighbor happy. They're working on that right now. But this was a perfect opportunity, I told her, to introduce our native plant ordinance, our sample ordinance. And she agreed. She's excited. She's going to pursue that. And she needs to educate people also about her native plants, which they had a reason why they were there, which was for, retention of water, watershed ideas, different things. And she wanted to educate people in the community about that. That's a good example of somebody who had a question. I've got a ticket. What should I do with it? I was able to talk to her. I email, and I also call people on the phone. Different Wild Ones attorneys handle calls differently or requests differently. I like to talk to people because sometimes I need to ask some very specific questions so I can give you a really good answer. The second call I had this week was about No Mow May. Now, some of you might have heard about this. This is a movement, a nationwide movement to try not to mow your grass in the month of May. And the reason is it gives grass time to grow longer and provide extra food for pollinators and habitat. Now, I don't know about you, but I tried No Mow May and our acreage could not sustain it. My husband had to go out and mow yesterday and today. But I had somebody who called and she said, I really want to do No Mow May, except guess what? I've got a ticket because my grass is too long. Can I just tell them that it's No Mow May? Sadly, though her intention was very, very good, no. Any kind of community or national movement, if you have an ordinance and it's written, you do have to follow it. These ordinances are what we call strict liability, which means it is what it is. If your grass is too long, there's no defense. Okay. Oftentimes traffic accidents are strict liability. It is just, there is no excuse. So I had to sadly tell her that you need to mow. Now you can mow higher. You can mow right up to the ordinance level. So maybe if it's 3 inches for your grass, you can mow it exactly at 3 inches. But sadly, you do have to mow. So those were two really great questions that I thought I would share here today about the kind of things and questions and topics that are sent to us, the wild lawyers. Number two, reach out to other local experts or other homeowners. Why? Because there's power in numbers, everybody. For every native plant person that you know, there's probably 5 or 6 that you don't even know are in your community. So, of course, belonging to a Wild Ones chapter in your area is an awesome way to meet other native plant lovers, to give you a network and develop that friendship and that camaraderie. It is wonderful to have support because if you approach a municipality about changing the law, it speaks volumes if you have 50 people come to city council or the town hall meeting. One is nice, 50 really shows support. And that's why I say, who is local? Who are the experts? Who can help you? Okay. Join together, which is number 3 on this slide. Network, network, network. Now, it doesn't have to just be anybody locally, though that's very helpful. I would encourage you to develop a local network and then expand it regionally. Okay. And if you need help with that, that's another thing. Call me. I can help you with that. Other Wild Ones staff members can help with that. But there is power in numbers. Many, many times our elected officials are so terribly busy with the mechanics of governing. Right now is a time in a lot of municipalities where budgets are due. Numbers are being crunched and really horrible and hard decisions are being made. They would love to talk about native plants, but they've got to keep the lights on, so to speak, keep the power running, keep all the things going that cities have to do for their citizens. And so the more you can do together and the more you can network, the more polished and presented you can be, so that when you approach those city leaders, you really make a big difference. And I just wanted to put on here that the Volunteer Wild Lawyers team is available to offer advice, as I said, to chapters and individual members, but always remember, we can't represent members charged with ordinance violations. We can direct you to local counsel, we can give you some general advice, but because lawyers are licensed in individual states, for instance, I'm only licensed in Iowa, I unfortunately can't give specific legal advice in any of the other states that aren't my home state. I did include one more list here, and that is I wanted to show you what a code section looks like. So this is from the current code of Sioux City, Iowa, where I was a city attorney for a number of years. And here are some areas or topics that you might find the weed police laws. So it was pretty easy in Sioux City to go to the city code. Most city codes are located online. So I would recommend for anybody starting the ordinance search to go to the city, go to the city's website and see if you can look up ordinances or laws in the search bar. After you find the ordinances, what you can do then is type in weed police, native plants, certain keywords like you would in a Google search, and you'll probably find some things come up pretty quickly. So when I did that in the city of Sioux City, everything was found under chapter 17 and specifically 17.32, weed control. And there you see we've got section 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and 60. Duties, criteria, notice, what happens when you fail to cut the weeds, assessment, and penalties. Now, I will tell you that the number one thing that I see that's an error in municipalities is people like to talk about weeds, weeds, weeds. But do we really know what a weed is? The very first thing anybody should look at when they're looking at updating or instituting a native plant ordinance is to state the word weed, but provide a definition. You'll notice in my sample ordinances, there is a large section at the top, and it is all about defining key words. And the first word that I find and often find is not at all defined is what is a weed. If I say a weed is X and you say a weed is Y, what does the law say? And if the law is silent, then your interpretation is just as valid as my interpretation. So that's the first thing I say. If you have a weed citation, do you even know what a weed is? If there's no definition, then your citation is going to fail in court. So that's one of my biggest tips about looking. Once you find an ordinance, that's the number one mistake I see. So to recap today, I encourage everybody to be a leader. I know public speaking and reaching out isn't for everybody, but I think once you get started, you'll see that it's not as hard as you might think. Also, when you network with people, you oftentimes might find a spokesperson and you could work behind the scenes. So please, please don't let this outreach and my ideas scare you. But remember my 5 key steps to getting a native plant ordinance passed. Number 1, remember to always turn a negative into a positive. Turn a weed into a bloom. Accept that you might have had a bad experience with this municipality. I know it's hard. I know it's hard. But in this day and age, calmness wins the day. Grace and leadership is what counts. And I know that in some political circles, it's not really the cool thing to be eloquent and graceful, but believe me, that is how you get things done. You want to bring people together, not divide people. So turn those weeds into blooms. I know everybody can do it. Number 2, show them the why and the benefits. All elected officials want to know what they can do to make life better for everybody. Okay. What are the benefits? And remember, the number 1 benefit always is, how can this save the municipality money? How can this help us? Okay. If you can attach a monetary value to this and how it's going to save money, you've got a real winner. Number 3, and this is a big one, know the right people. Remember my example. If I went to mom and I didn't get what I want, I always went to my grandma, okay? Find out who's in charge, but then accept that they might be very busy, like the head of inspections and appeals when I worked at Sioux City. They had 100 things under them, okay? But find maybe the person who is under them, and then make yourself, remember, not a pest, but an asset, okay? Be their best friend in a good way. Take some incentive. Take the lead. You might be incredibly surprised how far they let you take this. Matter of fact, they may say, you've got a blank check. Send me an ordinance and we'll approve it. That would be the best scenario. And I've seen it happen. Know the right people. And remember to always what? Educate, educate, educate. Number 4, read the current law, research it, find it, and then figure out what you're going to do with it. Is it old and antiquated? Does it have some good parts, some bones you can salvage from it? Or are you going to offer up something brand new? And if you want to know where to start, you have a great sample ordinance available to you that is on the website and we know has been passed successfully. So use our native ordinance, our sample ordinance to get started. And number 5, and I think this sums up everything, get involved and be a resource now and later. I didn't really touch on later, and I'd like to conclude this webinar by talking about later. So let's say you do this like those ladies that I worked with who defended the abused pets, and they were just so full of energy, and we worked together and they were so pleased with the event. Okay, so once we passed their ordinance, which was well publicized, they went a step further and they did public education. They did seminars. They bought a billboard in town. We didn't have social media like we do now. You could do a web page. You could put it out on social media. Matter of fact, your citizens group could have a website. Just think about that. A website is pretty inexpensive and a Facebook page is free, or Instagram. What a better way. There is no better way than to advertise a local citizens group and tout its accomplishments than a Facebook page. What a great way to network. So once you have your ordinance, you want to make sure that people know it. And so how do you do that? Speak at the local garden club. Find out if you can go on your local news stations where they have talk around the town or talk in the morning. Use every opportunity where there's gardeners to talk about this. And more importantly, find a way to maybe talk to gardeners or to people who are not gardeners. Make sure that elected officials are getting their hands dirty, so to speak. I think a great activity would be a groundbreaking. Perhaps you pass this ordinance and you find a community project and you invite those lawmakers who helped you pass this law to a groundbreaking. Get some shovels, paint them gold, put a big bow on them, and break ground and have a photo up. It's all about touting your accomplishments as a native plant advocate. And remember, there are no rules and there are no limits. Whatever you can see and believe, you can do here. And I am here as an attorney to help you. So I hope I've given you a big pep talk. I hope I've encouraged you to take a look at our native ordinances. So many people view laws and ordinances as these stuffy, horrible things, but they're really what makes our governments tick. And governments really are for the people and of the people. And so I hope I've given you some encouragement and, most importantly, some avenues and some ways to get involved in getting out the word about our sample native plant ordinance. And I hope I've inspired you to be a leader in the native plant movement. And for now, I'm Roseanne Plant, one of the proud Wild Ones attorneys, and I hope to hear from you really soon.